The braziers along the processional of triumph burned blue with naphtha-rich flame, tinting the marble arcade of the Great Pyramid in dreamy cobalt haze. At their core, the fires licked thin sheets of hammered copper, making the metal groan and crackle like the timbers of a ship in a rising gale. Striding beneath those groaning tongues of fire, Daenerys Targaryen felt as though the city itself murmured secrets, Meereen breathing out centuries of glory and grievance in a single hissed exhalation. She had dressed not in silvered mail or the plain linen of a conqueror, but in a silk gown the color of a summer sea, its high slit hem dripping with seed pearls and fragments of polished shell. Across her breast, immaculate dragons embroidered in white gold chased one another in an unbroken ring, the three-headed sigil of a dynasty she was forever sworn to honor. Beneath that gleaming triptych, her heart beat the measured cadence of a warhorse at rest yet ready to gallop, to rear, to tear free if reins slackened for even a heartbeat. This was no battlefield, she reminded herself. Not Meereen, not tonight. The plaza beyond the processional grinned with 10,000 carved stelae. By tradition, each represented a slave freed during the ancient blood law amnesties of Hizdahr the Great. They stood as silent witnesses, their hieroglyphic faces catching the blue fire in twin crescents of shadow. And between those stony souls, real men and women, freedmen and former masters alike, crowded against gilt rope lines to glimpse the bride of dragons. Bride. The sound of the word inside her mind tasted of ash and lemon both. She could still recall the crackling teak pyre on the red waste, the smell of charred horse, and the feel of Drogo's lifeless braid slipping through her fingers. A life ago. A life measured in suns scorched and cities taken. Yet here she was again, walking toward a man whose hands would tomorrow rest upon the curve of her back, as matter-of-factly as a gelding saddle. Hizdahr Loraq waited upon the diamond-polished dais at the foot of the great harpy statue, robed in ivory samite trimmed with sea-green lace roses. His collar of fused electrum and jade caught the brazier light and scattered it in shards like shattered ice across his sharp Meereenese cheekbones. He bowed deep the moment her pale shoes brushed the lower step. Lower than protocol required, lower than she expected. It did not escape her that the entire plaza hushed at the sight. A scion of the oldest slaving line in Hizdahr, bending knee to a girl queen from the far ends of the world. "Your radiance," he intoned in Valyrian, smooth as a sandbank. "I stand ready." She forced her lips into a crescent, soft enough to be mistaken for a smile. "Then let us begin." Ender. Afterward the city roared. Bronze trumpets on the eastern wall blared a chord older than the doom, and spiral shells answered from the arsenal quay. Firepots blossomed on every parapet, and the stars themselves seemed to pulse with borrowed light. Daenerys watched from the rear balcony of the pyramid's 73rd terrace, the chamber of 1,000 veils, once reserved for the harpy queens of old. The wind tugged at her braid, and in its pull, she felt the phantom nip of dragon teeth. Regal and Viserion, still shackled in the catacombs, impatient beyond measure. From these heights she almost heard them, wings scraping stone, throats keening behind iron gates. "Peace," Hizdahr whispered beside her. "Listen to them sing for peace." The words were well chosen. She folded her arms across the temperate hush that followed. Below, fireworks burst in torrents of green and gold over the silent sisters' fountain. Petals of bright flame rained across the terracotta roofs of the craftsman's quarter. For a heartbeat, the city looked forged of molten jade. Peace is never so loud. Daenerys kept her gaze on the glowing roofs. There is celebration, and there is peace. They are cousins, not twins. Hizdahr gave a gentle shrug. "As your radiance commands. Yet Meereen has thirsted long, and joy is a draught rare as shade in the red waste." "Joy cannot be decreed," she said, "nor bound by wedding contracts." The twist of amusement that touched his mouth might have been affection, or merely the practiced grace of a born diplomat. She resolved not to wonder which. Instead, she traced the broad band of hammered silver newly clasped about her finger. A bride token wrought in the image of twin harpies, their wings unfurled to cradle a single dragon's egg of pale amethyst. The ring was heavy. Everything felt heavy. The silk of her gown, the jeweled circlet upon her brow, the weight of Meereen's expectation. She turned from the parapet. "Come, we must attend the great rejoicing." Hizdahr inclined his head. "Of course, my queen." Ben Noal. The great rejoicing proved a river of saffron wine, and honeyed locusts, and flayed lamb, steeped in mint sauce so fragrant, it masked the faint coppery tang of fresh blood. Daenerys accepted none of it. Instead, she pressed among her people with a chalice of iced water, stopping often to greet freedmen who bowed until their foreheads brushed the tiles. Once a shrimp-haired girl scarcely 12 summers seized the hem of her gown and sobbed thanks for the day the Unsullied toppled the master's gibbet. Daenerys knelt, smoothed the child's hair, and bid her rise tall. "Remember your name," she said. "Wear it proudly. No one may claim you again." Hizdahr observed all from 3 paces behind, his long fingers steepled. To his credit, he did not flinch at the worship the freedmen poured upon his bride. Nor did he preen when the old master families, including several who once plotted her death, lifted gilded chalices to toast the Harpy Queen reborn. Peace, he might have argued, required such theater. Daenerys swallowed the thought like bitter gall. Near midnight, the musicians struck up the traditional dance of the succession of scales. 12 lithe girls, in sheer white gauze, unfurled along the banquet hall, each moving as though linked spine to spine with her sisters. Their bare arms glittered beneath gold dust, and at every calculated ventral twist the assembly gasped. Here was grace engineered to entrance masters and footmen both. At the center of the formation spun a single boy costumed in jade leather scaled like a dragon's hide, long fluted horns crafted of ivory fastened to a half mask across his brow. It was a beautiful horror. The children twined and dipped around him in arcs of submission. At the climax, they prostrated themselves on the green marble floor while the boy dragon turned slow, drinking in their worship. A symbolic reenactment. Giscari legend held that the first harpy had tamed the winged flame by offering up her 1,000 daughters as tribute, one for each city-state conquered. Daenerys felt her stomach cramp. When the dance concluded, applause thundered. Hizdahr leaned close, breath scented faintly of spiced persimmon. "It honors you as well, my bride. Meereen's mothers would see their daughters reared under your wisdom. They looked to the Dragon Queen for guidance. Now, well, they should look to themselves," she said, softer than she intended. In the pit of her heart, dragonfire coiled restless, wanting to roar. Hizdahr's smile did not waver. "My love, you have the heart of a conqueror still. Yet know that conquest is courtesy, to spare, to burn. Each proves mastery in turn. Choice." Perhaps he believed that. Perhaps he meant to soothe. But all Daenerys could see as he spoke were the children on the marble, bodies bent in forced devotion before a false dragon. A mirror, if she dared hold it. She excused herself with a frost-thin nod and drifted away through curtains of the hue of fresh lilies. Let him drink and flatter and weave his nets. She required an hour's air. When the night sky above the Great Pyramid stretched vast and star-clotted. Here on the roof terrace, warm wind swept in from Slaver's Bay, carrying briny tang and distant thunder of surf. Beyond the dark calm of the harbor, the blockade ships of Newgate glimmered like cold embers upon the horizon. They kept their distance, for now, but each massed silhouette burned behind Daenerys' eyes like the outline of chains. She leaned on a parapet carved centuries ago to resemble a row of harpy wings. Soft footsteps approached. "Your radiance." The accent belonged to Missandei of Annaith, light as reed flute. "Forgive me, but Grey Worm begs you meet him in the Shavapat's war room." "Urgent. War room? Tonight?" A hiss of foreboding curled in Daenerys' belly. She nodded and followed her handmaiden through an unseen service stair. As they descended, torches winked in iron sconces, each pool of flame briefly illuminating Missandei's anxious eyes. They found the chamber door unbarred, the hinges freshly oiled. Inside waited Skahaz Mokandak, the Shavapat himself, beside Grey Worm, whose Spartan armor bore a fresh slash across the belly plate. Blood darkened the leather thong at his hip, though he seemed not to notice. "Your Grace," Skahaz rasped. brushing his shaved scalp in salute. We feared to disturb the feast, yet matters turned grave. "Tell me," she commanded, taking the seat reserved for her at the end of the onyx table. Grey Worm spoke in clipped Kiskari common. "Harpy shadows strike again. 2 freedmen patrol posts attacked in night's 3rd hour. 12 dead, 8 unsullied, 4 freedmen, marks carved on walls. The Harpy sigil," Daenerys finished, bile rising. Skahaz slammed a mailed fist upon the map spread across the tablet. "Peace, your king consort calls it. Peace purchased in blood we spill while the masters dine on silver plates. You must let me hang the sons. I have names. I have proof." Denai. Hizdahr had sworn her to peace 2 weeks past. No more crucifixions, no more retaliatory executions. Her vow bound the Shevapate's hands and shackled her own. "I will not rekindle war on my wedding night," she said, though her tone lacked fire. "Double patrols. Offer 300 golden dragons for any Harpy mask delivered to the palace with the wearer alive." Grey Worm inclined his head. "It is done." Skahaz's lips peeled from his teeth. "Gold cannot buy loyalty where old blood still rules, your grace. Slaves trust in you, not coin. And masters fear only steel." Namanda. Daenerys rose. "I will find a way to make them trust another future. The wedding stands as promise. So long as Hizdahr honors me, I will honor my word." The Shevapate muttered something in low Kiskari, a curse ripe with venom, but he bowed. "Leave us," she said. "Grey Worm, remain." Skahaz swept out, door echoing behind. Alone with the unsullied commander, Daenerys' mask slipped. Was it bad? Her whisper barely stirred the air. Grey Worm's dark eyes betrayed nothing, yet his voice gentle. "Unsullied live to protect the Dragon Queen. We know spear pierces flesh. This is not bad. This is duty." "Duty," she repeated, hollow. "I would chain the world if only to keep them safe." Her gaze drifted to the map, Meereen's avenues painted in precise scarlet ink. But in her mind's eye the streets looked wet with the red she had spilled, and would spill again. Grey Worm waited, unblinking. She drew a breath steady and deep. "Send riders to inspect the harbor galleys. No ship leaves without my seal. If the Harpy means to answer blood with flight, I must see them caged." "Banaz Saran." "Yes, your grace." As she turned away, dragon fire throbbed inside her chest, heavier even than the bride ring on her hand. Some vows, she thought, were chains forged of silk, yet silk unraveled quick beneath flame. No. Dawn bled rose gold across the apex windows when Daenerys finally dismissed her guards and entered the nuptial chamber. At the center of the vast canopy bed Hizdahr lay awake, propped upon one elbow. Moonlight silvered the plane of his bare chest, and in its glow, his lean musculature resembled a marble sculpture come to life. He regarded her with a study's focus, as though mapping each line of tension in her shoulders. "My queen," he murmured. "Have the revels exhausted you?" "Not I," she said, shrugging free the embroidered robe. "War, counsel, torments me more." But she would not burden him with that. Not yet. Hizdahr's lips curved. "Then let revels continue, you and I." She crossed the inlaid hardwood floor barefoot, the night air kissing her calves. Within her roiled equal parts apprehension and the unspoken hope that beneath politics lurked some flicker of genuine warmth. She had wed before for duty, and for that first husband learned to love a shadow of what he once was. With Hizdahr she suspected neither love nor hatred, only calculation. The quantity frightened her less than the unknown sum. He reached for her hand as she climbed onto the mattress of feather down, took it gently, pressed a soft kiss to her palm. Then he laid the hand atop his heart. Its beat drummed, steady and slow. "Does a dragon's heart beat so calm?" she asked, surprising herself. "The dragon's fire burns constant." He guided her fingers to the hollow of his throat. "Yet its flame does not flicker until stoked." She allowed him to draw her nearer. Silken sheets whispered beneath them, and for a spell, the Great Pyramid was a world small enough to hold in 2 entwined hands. "Kandawala." Morning found Daenerys seated upon the Dawn throne in the Hall of Grand Petitioners, Hizdahr at her side, on the lesser jade seat of the consort. The mosaic floor beneath pooled sunrise light through vaulted slit windows, illuminating serpents of crimson and onyx tile that coiled beneath supplicants' feet. One by one they stepped forward, merchants seeking tariff relief, freedmen petitioning land grants, minor nobles begging pardon for unsanctioned duels. Daenerys listened, weighed, judged. Hizdahr sat still, offering counsel only when she turned a questioning eye. In that, he surprised her, never intruding, never undercutting her word. By afternoon the last petitioner bowed out. A hush descended, broken only by the faint rustle of palm fronds. Daenerys exhaled. "You wield justice with a surgeon's hand," Hizdahr said, rising to stretch stiff limbs. Swift, precise, and measured. She arched a brow. "You expected otherwise? I expected you would need rest after the wedding danced until dawn. Yet here you sit, radiant as new-forged steel." His smile warmed, and for an instant seemed genuine. "Come. I have a gift prepared. A matrimonial surprise." Gifts, she thought, were the oldest currency of manipulation. But curiosity pried her from the throne. He led her through a corridor of carved lapis pillars, down a spiral stair seldom traveled by courtiers. The walls here bore no frescoes, only raw limestone smelling of chalk and damp earth. Down they went, torch after torch, until the stair debouched into a torch-lit alcove whose floor glimmered with a shallow mirror of water fed by an underground spring. A sanctum forgotten by most, Hizdahr said. In elder days, it served as the Harpy Queen's secret refuge. At the alcove center, upon a pedestal of pale sandstone, rested a folded cloth of indigo. Hizdahr approached, lifted the cloth, and unveiled a circlet wrought of Valyrian steel, chased with lapis lazuli flame motifs. In its heart rested a smooth piece of obsidian carved into the stylized shape of a dragon's eye. Fire from the torches danced along its polished surface, as though something inside smoldered. "Our own," he said softly. "Forged long before the doom, recently discovered in a collapsed vault beneath the Temple of Graces. I present it to you, Daenerys, first of that name, so that Meereen knows its queen stands apart from any consort." 9. She reached, fingertips brushing the metal. It was cool as dusk. Valyrian steel, rare, priceless, and perilous to keep. She lifted the circlet, the dragon eye gem seeming to stare into her soul. "It belongs to the Dragon Lord within you," Hizdahr whispered, "and it proclaims that Meereen's peace lives only so long as her dragon draws breath." At that she studied him, searching for mockery, but found only earnest calm. Perhaps he meant it truly. Perhaps he loved peace so fiercely, he would crown the storm itself to keep it near. Either way, she could not deny the poetry. She set the circlet upon her brow. The weight settled like memory, firm and unmoving. In that silent alcove, torchlight shivering across the water, queen and consort stood reflected side by side. Dragonfire and harpy wings merged in rippling silhouette. The following moon turn sailed past on quiet tides. Each day Hizdahr convened councils with the great families, extracting coin for civil projects, aqueduct repair, market square paving, new ramparts along the riverfront. In return he granted them concessions, certificates of indemnity for past harpy affiliations, limited leases on former state-seized vineyards. All bore her dragon seal, yet each concession could be revoked should evidence arise of treason. In public the masters welcomed compromise. In private Daenerys sensed festering resentment. So she walked among the sandstone barrios nightly, cloaked, with only Sir Barristan and Missandei in discreet shadow. She listened at taverns where freedmen drank pale carrot wine. She paused at alleys where Carthine's spice wagons steamed. She knelt among orphans chalking hopscotch circles near the fishmonger's plaza. What did they whisper of their queen? Much and little, she learned. Some still feared that dragons chained were dragons provoked. Others praised the coin subsidies that let their children buy bread. Yet across such talk wove a single bright thread. Hope that Meereen's nights might pass without screams in the courtyard. Hope for dawn unblooded. Hoped that Hizdahr's harpy queen could charm both dragon and blade. One smell of street lavender in a summer squall, one clatter of tin cups on the paving stones, and she, too, dared hope. Ain? But peace, like glass, cracks beneath invisible pressure. It began with rats, or so the healers claimed. A fever from the summer marsh rolled through the canals east of the Hizdahr gate. Swollen glands, red boils, death within 2 days. Slums burned incense and prayed to a dozen gods. Hizdahr doubled grain stipends. Daenerys emptied treasure vaults to import Myrish surgeons, yet bodies still gathered like driftwood at the canal locks. Then the rumors, half-truths braided with lies, slip-knotted around her name. That the Dragon Queen spurned the Lazarene healer's remedy because it stank of sheep's milk. That she hoarded water for the noble district baths. That her dragons drank blood offerings by moonlight to keep their queen beautiful. None said such words to her face, but in the wine shops they spread like brush fire. And in the darkness, harpy masks sharpened their talons. Soon? She felt it first in the wind, a tang of smoke north by northeast as she stood upon the roof terrace one dusk. By the time the first alarm bell tolled, the night was already aflame. 3 mansions in the silken quadrant burned bright as pyres, and flaming arrows rose from shadowed streets to slash the star scatter above. Dragons screamed in the catacombs, rattling chains against basalt. The harpy had chosen its hour with cruel precision. Midsummer festival? Half the unsullied off-duty, streets stuffed with revelers. Daenerys donned boiled leather, called for Sir Barristan's escort, and stormed into the night. Hizdahr tried to follow. She ordered him stay, command from queen to consort. His protest turned to bitter air. Streets once sweet with date cakes now stank of burning cedar and human fear. Every alley coughed smoke. Barristan cut down a masked killer who leapt from a balcony. 2 arrows found his greaves. Grey Worm's cohort met them at the Plaza of Whispers, shields locking with iron clang as freedmen rallied behind. They strike 11 quarters, Grey Worm reported. Sword wet. They kill masters and freed both. They wish blame to fall on your peace. Daenerys bared her teeth. They shall have blame enough to choke. Yet as she turned toward the north steps, a voice called from the street, cracking, desperate. Dracarys, free them. Let the dragons burn our foes. More voices joined. The cry spread like contagion. Dracarys, Dracarys. Soon hundreds howled for fire. And Daenerys felt the world tilt. Felt the twin hearts beating within her breast. One queen sworn to mercy. One dragon born of flame. Cage doors we oil. Chains we forge, she muttered. I swore they would stay bound. Grey Worm eyed her, unreadable. Barristan's aged lips trembled. Your Grace, if fire is the only cure. She raised a gauntleted hand. No, not yet. She would not be a monster made of smoke and fear. Not tonight. Not while she still believed a flicker of peace might live. They pushed on, every street a crucible. At the Hizdahr gate, water wagons overturned smoldered, wheels melted. A masked harpy burst from a doorway and thrust a spear at her ribs. Barristan parried. Daenerys drove her own blade through silken flesh to the spine. Blood fountained across her sleeve. Behind the harpy mask, the dead man was no master. His cheeks were pocked, his hands calloused from loom work. A freedman turned killer. Daenerys staggered back, bile rising. They sow chaos, Barristan warned. Brother against brother, your wedding undone in a single night's terror. No, she whispered, though she knew the truth. At sunrise the fires died, quenched by bucket lines and brave hearts. The floor of the great throne hall glistened red with the blood of executed harpies. 23 masks laid before the Dawn throne like obscene tribute. Skahaz stood triumphant. Hizdahr stood stricken, hands trembling as he beheld the dead. Some were sons of his former allies. Some were cousins. All were Meereenese. This is peace, he hissed at her, eyes glassy. Or is this conquest refusing to end? Daenerys felt as though the Valyrian circlet scorched her scalp. I would call it justice. Your peace shall not be paid for in dragonfire, but neither in my people's blood." Hizdahr's jaw clenched. "So be it. Yet know the masters will bleed before they kneel again." He turned, cloak swirling, and left the hall in silence. In his wake, Daenerys fingered the dragon eye gem atop her circlet. Its obsidian depths reflected nothing, yet in them she saw a city of ash, and a queen crowned by fire alone. Oh, Pandisha. Days passed. The fever abated under new medicines. The streets grew quiet, too quiet, like a desert before sandstorm. Hizdahr did not share her bed. Meetings became terse exchanges. Rumor placed him in secret conclave with lesser pyramids, bargaining for a return to traditional law. Proof lacked, yet the Shevapate spies whispered. And always, from the catacombs, her dragons cried. At last, Daenerys descended those black stairs alone, torch in hand, heart thunderous. The iron gate groaned as she unlocked it with trembling key. Within, Rhaegal flapped ragged wings at her approach, eyes like molten copper. Viserion crouched, pale smoke drifting from his jaws. She knelt between them, torch head guttering in stale air. "My children," she murmured. "Forgive me." She stroked each scaled snout, sang an old Braavosi lullaby Illyrio's dancing girl once taught her. The dragons hissed, but gentled, and in their lamplight she remembered heat on her cheeks atop Drogo's pyre. The moment wings beat the night for the first time in 100 years. "I would set you free," she confessed. "But freedom bought with innocent flesh is no freedom at all." "Can you promise me temper? Can you guard the people I swore to protect?" Rhaegal blinked. "No," she answered for them, voice breaking. "I know you cannot. You are flame given form, and I am the fool who thought she might rule that flame." She wept into scaled hide. Dragonfire hissed like a lover's breath. A single whisper escaped her lips then. A plea to gods she no longer trusted. "Show me the path, or let the world burn." The answer arrived 2 dawns later with a raven from Yunkai. The wise masters applauded her marriage, it read, and would send envoys to discuss trade concessions. Chief Queen Daenerys lifted all sanctions on the slave trade throughout Slaver's Bay. Failure, the parchment assured her, would result in war. Their fleets outnumbered Meereen's 5-1. Their allies included Volantis and New Guys. Already 16 siege towers were under construction on the north shore of the Skahazadon River. Hizdahr delivered the message in person, face pale. "It is peace or dragons now," he said. "I beg you choose peace." She stared at the raven seal dangling from his hand, wax marbled black and gold. Slaver colors. Her gaze rose to his. "You beg me choose chains. I beg you choose life." His voice cracked. "For our city. For any children we might." She flinched as though struck. "Children? When freed babes are sold naked in Yunkai's plaza." Hizdahr's shoulders sagged. "Then you choose war." Daenerys lifted her chin. "I choose justice." And so at dawn on the 4th day of the harvest moon, she walked again to the catacombs. This time she bore no torch, only the crown of Valyrian steel. Her heart hammered gates of bone. Rhaegal and Viserion sensed her, wings stirring dust like desert wind. She whispered words, soft, steady, and unlatched the iron collars one by one. Chains fell with a sound like thunder rolled into iron. Dragons stepped forward, free. At the threshold Daenerys paused, turning to meet Ser Barristan's worried gaze. He had followed, silent as judgment. "Tell the Shevapate," she said. "Gather the unsullied. Summon the freedmen. Tonight we fly." "And Hizdahr?" Her throat tightened around his name. "Send him to the Temple of Graces. If he would pray for peace, let him do so. Prayers are all that remain him now." Barristan inclined his white head. "Yes, you command, your grace." Then Daenerys stepped into the sunlight, dragons flanking her, bronze and cream wings unfurling against a sky the color of spilled blood. Below, Meereen's avenues trembled with people craning necks, mouths parted in dread and awe. And from that sea of faces rose again the chant that once heralded her victory across the Giscari plain. Iracaris. Tei. For a heartbeat she felt the tremor of destiny. Felt the ashes of old empires swirling around her feet. She closed her eyes. The crown upon her brow warmed as though stoked by unseen flame. When she opened them, the world watched a dragon queen stride to war. Yet war is not thunder in a single heartbeat. It is a storm that gathers across 10,000 silent breaths. In the days that followed, Daenerys forged alliances with brothers once estranged, Grey Worm, Skahaz, the mercenary captains of the Stormcrows, while Hizdahr remained cloistered in white marble halls, pleading with priests for the gods to spare Meereen from the fury of dragons. The fleets of Yunkai advanced, sails black against dawn. But on the fifth night, Rhaegal descended upon their forward picket line, wings hammering air, and the sea roiled beneath green-gold flame. War galleys cracked like tinder. On shore, refugees looked upon burning masts and fell to their knees, praying to the pale-haired woman who rode the night. Still, victory bore a cost no harpy's ledger could reckon. For every ship sunk, a seagull fisherman starved. For every slaver cowed, a freedman child orphaned when cinders rained upon mud-brick huts. And always the whisper in the wine shops, "Ye's this better than chains?" Where? Daenerys hunted the whisper like a wounded wolf hunts crows. She poured out coin for grain ships, emptied her vaults to erect field hospitals. She spurred masons to raise new wells and aqueducts, and she bled the master's treasuries to pay. Still the whisper slithered. Still, mothers wept. Every night she returned to the Great Pyramid, to the empty bed where Hizdahr once lay. His scent, cinnamon and cedar, clung to pillows like memory no breath could dispel. She would sit upon the edge and run fingers across silk, wondering if peace might have lived had she been a different woman, or Meereen a different city. On the 20th night of the siege, as fires flickered on the horizon and dragon roars echoed like mourning bells, a messenger brought grim news. Hizdahr Loraq, consort of the Dragon Queen, found dead in the Temple of Graces, throat slit beneath the eyes of the weeping lady statue. A harpy mask lay beside him, smeared in his blood, proof of guilt or of sacrifice. Daenerys dismissed the messenger dully. She walked to the balcony overlooking the Plaza of Truth and stared until dawn. When at last the sun crested the breakwater, she felt nothing. Nothing but the brush of wind across a crown that seemed to weigh 1,000 worlds. In that moment, she understood Hizdahr's final, desperate plea. That peace is not absence of war, but the fragile dream that men wish he must survive their sins. Dragons soared beyond the city walls, hunting ships yet unsunk. Their shadows tumbled over pyramids and bazaars, over shattered chains and new-forged spears alike. Below, Meereen trembled, poised forever between freedom and flame. And atop the highest tower, Daenerys Stormborn Targaryen, mother of dragons, widow of Khal and queen of Harpy's men, watched the dawn kindle her city in molten gold, knowing she could never again be bride or conqueror or healer alone. She must be Wayal or not, for this was the price of ruling forever, the price of being fire made flesh. Ka. Smoke rolled like bruised velvet across the Skahazadon at dawn, masking the sun so completely that Daenerys first mistook the copper disk reflected on the river for the sky star itself. It was a war-drowned morning, still, uncanny in its hush, as if every gull, every street dog, every gossiping vendor had sensed that even their smallest cry might tip the world toward chaos. From the roof terrace, she watched charred flotsam drift past the pilings, scorched rigging, a shattered oar, a lacquered figurehead shaped in the likeness of a Yunkish courtesan, now blackened to a leer. The night before, Rhaegal's green-gold breath had turned 5 siege barges into floating pyres. Yet the slavers' armada ringed the bay undaunted, sails stitched with slave brands fluttering in languid taunt. Grey Worm found her at the parapet, helm tucked beneath one arm. His dark eyes traced the smoke but did not linger. Shavapet scouts report the Yunkish landward columns Reach the old spice road by midday, he said. Sellsword banners among them. Wind blown. Long lances, lost legion. Sell steel will bend if we break their purse, she murmured. Have we gold enough to lure them? Gold, yes. Time, no. They march for plunder promised, the city itself. Pay comes after sack. Daenerys' hand tightened on the crenel edge. Far below, the harbor boom remained raised. Two linked chains thick as mill wheels. Rhaegal circling lazily above like a green comet come to rest. Then we buy their honor with fear, she said. Let the windblown see what fire does to iron. Bid Rhaegal save one flagship tonight. Spare its crew, burn its masts. Let survivors carry warning. Grey Worm gave the barest nod. He never questioned the calculus. For him, casualty ledgers were columns in the same endless drill begun in Astapor. Obey. Endure. Prevail. And Viserion? She asked, though the answer coiled already in her chest. Viserion circles the south walls, hunting dusk bats. He obeys no order tonight. Dragons were freedom cut into muscle and sinew. No whip nor word, nor song could wholly claim them. For now, Daenerys must court that freedom like a wary suitor, lest it consume all she meant to protect. By high sun the city bristled. Unsullied in triple strength lined Camelback Ridge, shields overlapping like hammered obsidian scales. Freedmen militias manned the crenels in quilted jack chains. Pikes braced against gabions packed with river mud. In the plaza below the Pyramid of Knowledge, 100 child runners awaited coin orders clutched in grimy fists, messengers swift enough to race any breach. The Sheva Pate himself stalked the curtain wall, plate armor painted blue, shouting Hizdahr war cannons older than Valyria. From the throne balcony she heard the first horns, deep and hungry, rolling across the fields like thunder forged in bronze. The Yunkish columns advanced, banners of burnt umber sown with golden locusts, ranks of slave spearmen driven by whips to pace. Ziga towers rattled on ironclad wheels, each draped in wet horsehide, to muffle dragon fire. At their sides lumbered the fighting pit's brutal harvest, iron-collared aurochs, shoulders chained to battering frames. Pugiliers in spiked masks promised freedom for every breach they opened. Behind came the sellsword companies, bright pennants jostling like carnival colors above poached killers. Sir Barristan strode to her side in full snow-white plate, helm under arm. Silvered hair framed his face, older than the hills yet eyes sharp as morning frost. Your Grace, he said, the hour is upon us. Have you chosen your place? Among my people, she answered, voice steady. I will stand on the great eastern wall where freedmen hold the line. The masters will see their dragon queen defends freed flesh first. Barristan inclined his head, though worry creased his brow. Forgive blunt counsel, but a queen slain by stray bolt serves no freedman. Grey Worm answered for her, visor down. Unsullied shield the rider flame. Arrow finds her only across our corpses. The old knight accepted that testament with a nod and strode to his horse. The great eastern wall, built by Misa, the builder 5 centuries prior, commanded a sweeping view over sugar-cane paddies, now trampled into brown mush by marching feet. Daenerys arrived flanked by Barristan, Grey Worm, and 24 unsullied shield-bearers. A chant erupted along the parapet as she climbed the stone steps. Misa, Misa, though it faltered into awe when Rhaegal banked overhead, sun flashing emerald across his wings. She donned no helm. Let them see her hair, pale as new split moonstone, and no death wore beauty too. In her grip rested an ornate Kiskari war horn, studded with rubies. She raised it high. Silence rippled outward, contagious. Even enemy ranks seemed for heartbeats suspended. Then, she lowered the horn in signal. Rhaegal folded into a stoop like a dagger thrown by the gods. His scream sliced the hush. Green flame splashed across the first siege tower, seeking crevices the wet hides could not protect. Sap-soaked timbers burst into torchwood roar. Slave spearmen fled in shrieking rivers, scorched alive. The sellswords behind blew command whistles. Forward, lash discipline. But Mrs. waited as the blaze fed on pitch and horsehair lashings. A second tower met the same fate when Viserion, pale fire licking like ghost tongues, raked its roof. The slaver's center recoiled. Panic trashed the seasoned drills. Whipmasters struck, trying to herd terror back into order. Yet chain-bound soldiers broke lines, scattering into Kane's stubble like frightened deer. The Sellswords saw pay charring to ash and surged to salvage spoils, but unsullied javelins greeted them from ramparts. For every ladder raised, 5 fell, black shafts bristling like thistles. Still, chaos breeds boldness. On the field's western flank, the lost legion commander, old Myrish bravo named Cago the Tall, spurred his heavy horse band into a flanking charge, banner fringed red for blood owed. They skirted dragon arcs, eyes on a weak seam where freedmen militias held pikes inverted. Daenerys saw the gap open, too wide, too raw. "Shields to the breach," she shouted. Grey Worm barked repeating order. 50 unsullied detached, sprinting in silent discipline. Yet Cago's wedge slammed first, lances shattering wood, trampling men. Barristan swore, vaulting saddle, white cloak streaming as he swung through grapnel gap down stairwell to join the fray. On the parapet, Daenerys' breath caught. War unspooled beneath like some vast loom, threads of hope fraying in an eye blink. She gripped the stones so hard her nails tore. Another tower burned, but victory at one end would not mend ruin at the other. She inhaled until tension snapped. There was still one dragon unbridled by her call. Drogon, gigantic, night-scaled ruler of narrowed horizons, had not answered any horn since the Dothraki Sea. Yet the sky bore no bars. She pressed fingers to the crown over her brow, felt the obsidian dragon eye heat against her skin. "Find me the swiftest falconer," she ordered a runner boy wide-eyed at her knee. "And bring me a cask of fresh blood." He bolted. Grey Worm cast her a sidelong look. "You summon the black flame." "I woo him," she corrected. "A queen weds a city, a dragon weds the free sky. Love matters less than lure." Miawan Shidi. Moments later, the falconer arrived bearing a wicker coop of desert shrikes. Daenerys slid her palm on a dagger's edge and let blood drip across the oiled leather lid. The shrikes shrilled, frantic. She bent, whispering words all but drowned by battle din. Words half Valyrian rite, half lullaby of the red waste. Then she released them. A dozen small wings flashed into charred sky, stained by 4 drops of Dragon Queen's blood. They hurled upward, panicked specks weaving through smoke plumes. Daenerys closed her eyes and felt the air beyond her flesh. The hot currents, the crack of fire, the pulse of monstrous wings far across horizon. She called, not with horn, not with tongue, but with that deep chord in her bones whose note only dragons knew. Time contracted. She tasted iron. Somewhere below, Barristan's white cloak rose, then fell beneath a knot of legion blades. She heard freedmen's screams. She heard spear hafts shatter. And from beyond the Death Head dunes to the south came an echoing roar large enough to hollow stone. A roar like mountain avalanche given voice. The ramparts stiffened. Even Rhaegal, circling mid-attack, banked aside as a black shape vaster than any ship's sail cracked through the cloud bank, jaws gaping red. Drogon descended meteoric, his roar ripping banners to rag. He struck the cane fields directly behind the lost legion line. Black fire poured, thick as tar and bright as hell. Men vaporized. Horses reared, screaming until flesh peeled from bone. The shock wave flung legionnaires into the moat like dolls. The charge collapsed. Barristan rose amid smoke, crimson across brow, renewed blade raised. "For the queen," he thundered. And the freedmen answered, driving forward with crude pikes. The battle, which had teetered, broke. Cell companies fled first, faithless as coins in rain. Yunkish slave regiments saw masters retreat and cast aside spears. Aurochs collapsed under their own harnesses, trembling. By mid-afternoon, the plain lay littered with twisted brass and rivers of dark steam. Victory births its own breed of peril. Ashes breed seeds of next war. Daenerys paced the war room that night, boots sticky with congealed blood she had not the heart to scrub away yet. Grey Worm reported 600 unsullied dead or maimed. nearly 2,000 freedmen lost, and rubble damage to the eastern watchtower where Drogon's landing shock cracked foundation. Rhaegal nursed a ballista gash along his left flank earned while shielding Viserion. Most chilling, 3 harpy masks were found among the city sentries, turned inside the gates to sabotage. The enemy now nested within. "At dawn we strike their fleet," Shavapata urged, gaunt face feverlit. "Ride all 3 beasts. Burn every mast, every oar. Salt the bay with their bones." "Nyan." Daenerys tapped a finger on the table map. Numerically, the advice made sense. Without ships, Yunkai could not regroup. New Geas would think twice before rowing into a graveyard. Yet the vision rose of mothers crouched on shoreline, scrambling to douse cinders falling upon market stalls, of sailors leaping aflame, of smoke choking Meereen's newborn dawn. She looked to Barristan, seated stiff with bandaged ribs. If Aerys Targaryen had possessed 3 dragons, would King's Landing stand today? The old knight's pale eyes met hers unflinching. "No, your grace. It would have burned thrice over." "Mun Paranandal. Then we do not become him." She turned back to the gathering. "I will accept a parley flag tomorrow. Let the slavers see the fires licking their horizon and taste dread. When they sue for peace, we demand unconditional abolition and reparations to every freed family harmed." Shavapata spat. "They will feign surrender, stall, rebuild. Then they will face dragons again." Grey Worm spoke after a long pause. "Unsullied obey the Dragon Queen." So did the council, compelled by loyalty, by fear, by the echo of Drogon's roar outside the window. Parley convened at midday beneath a pavilion stitched from repurposed Yunkish sails. "Symbolic," Daenerys insisted. The enemy envoys arrived under white banners, eyes darting skyward at every flicker of shadow. Their spokesman, Lord Gorzak the Great Auspice, stank of myrrh and pouched arrogance. He tried first flattery, queen of peerless mercy, then veiled threat. Ports of the world will close to a tyrant, then bargaining. Each, she refused. "The world chose commerce and slaves," Gorzak protested. "How will Meereen feed itself when neighboring ports embargo grain?" "On grain purchased with the scales of dragons melted to gold," she answered. "And if the world starves us, it will starve together. For free folk do not carry chains of trade alone." At mention of melted dragon scales, the envoys paled. Dragons shed glass, in truth worthless for coin. Yet they feared the lengths she would go. In the end, Gorzak agreed to armistice, pending formal treaty. Hostages would be exchanged, 80 young nobles delivered into Meereen's care. Daenerys offered in return 20 unsullied, warriors who feared no blade and held no price. That night, under torchlight reflecting from harbor swell, she watched the first slaver flagship limp westward, sails patched from arrow holes, carrying tales of black fire. Weeks hardened into months shaped by reconstruction. Stone masons worked dawn to stars, setting buttresses beneath fractured towers. Freedwomen brewed lime mortar and sang songs once forbidden. Dragon sightings beyond city perimeters became rare. Rhaegal and Viserion roosted in the nearby limestone outcrops, content hunting claw-toothed goats. Drogon preferred the upper thermals, descending only when hunger or restless interest lured him. In council, Daenerys drafted the Edict of Twin Talons. Slaves henceforth unknown in Slaver's Bay. Debt servitude limited to 7 years. Manumission overseen by royal notaries appointed from both freed and ancient bloodlines. Masters protested quotas, but discovered negotiation easiest when held beneath stained glass windows depicting Drogon devouring chains. Still, dissent festered. Grain prices soared under embargo. The plague of rats returned in autumn cold snaps, stealing into grain silos. Hizdahr's former allies whispered that their queen had murdered her consort. Priests of the Weeping Lady wept louder, claiming drought punishment for harpy blood spilled without trial. One dusk a firebomb shattered against the western orphanage, killing 17 children. A clay urn stuffed with lamp oil and pitch. A harpy claw mark etched into the side. Daenerys arrived before the fires cooled, kneeling amid smoldering rubble. She held in her arms a boy too charred for tears, and vowed then that peace built on fear bred only darker rebellions. She convened the first assembly of equal scales inside the Great Pyramid's belly hall. Walls hung with banners of both free and master households. 200 delegates chosen by lottery, one from each 1,000 inhabitants, gathered beneath carved harpy wings newly gilded to include dragon heads. There they debated taxes, aquifer rights, plague mitigation, and trade accords. They argued until throats rasped. Yet they argued in public, no blades drawn. Strife laid bare lost half its venom. In winter, the embargo cracked. Qarthian traders, tempted by profit, anchored caravels under flag of the 13, betting that no dragon queen would torch ships laden with rare silks. She did not. Instead, she welcomed them with display flights of regal high above. Warning enough, commerce enough. Gold bled into markets. Red lines shortened. When spring rains came, Meereen smelled of wet brick and cinnamon new ground. Children chased kites across squares where gallows once shadowed. In the shadow of the pyramid grew vegetable plots, tilled by freed grandmothers using broken spearheads as spades. Dragons dozed in midday sun on fortification tops, content as cats in sunlight. Late one night, Daenerys walked alone along the processional of triumph. Its braziers now burning calm amber rather than naphtha blue. Flower sellers had placed clay bowls of night-blooming jasmine at each plinth, and the fragrance mixed with fragrant oil of cleaning lanterns. She stopped at the Stele Plaza and laid palm against one ancient slab. Its glyph face told of a slave named Tekka, freed by Hizdahr the great 5 centuries past. The stone held no memory, yet Daenerys thought she felt warmth, as if history breathed through it. A voice behind her. These stones outlive queens. She turned to find Barristan, white cloak, dull beneath moon, beard gone wholly silver. Some would argue queens outlive stones, she said. Alexander's empire fell, but his legend cannot be buried. His smile wore sadness. Alexander never ruled forever. Nor shall you, whatever poets print. She looked toward the pyramid, its apex torch a single star. Forever is not measured in lifetimes. It is measured in the deeds that chain one generation to the next. He glanced about the quiet street. You walk without guard. I walk with the city. Her gaze returned to the stone. If Meereen wishes me dead, walls are moot. He folded arms. I served many kings. Some banked trust. Some drained it. None could keep both crown and conscience intact. Vandapon. Do I still have mine? That question keeps it beating. She exhaled. Then tomorrow we will decree the final oath. Any born in Meereen share equal right to speak assembly, regardless of blood, old or freed. She waited for his caution. It did not come. The final oath ceremony drew throngs to the plaza of whispers. Children perched on shoulders. Vendors hawked honey cakes, shaped like dragons, clutching broken harpy masks. Daenerys stood upon a dais carved from the fallen harpy statue she'd toppled her first week. Rhaegal circled high, dusk sun flashing off his scales like emerald beacons. A hush fell when she raised the Valyrian steel circlet for all to see. This crown forged before doom, she called, weighs less than one chain link. Yet every link we break together lightens it still. I name Meereen a realm not of masters nor of dragons, but of people who choose their fates. Let the world witness a free city ruled not by fear, but by will, forged in fire and tempered by mercy. She set the crown upon her brow. Cheers welled, vast, untamed. Drums thundered ancestral rhythms, yet the stamping feet belonged to new free souls. As twilight claimed the sky, torches painted everything gold. From a balcony opposite, a choir of children, former street urchins now students of the assembly's new lyceum, began a song in lilting Valyrian. It told of a silver-haired queen who walked through fire and found in its embers not conquest, but kinship. The melody drifted across the plaza like lanterns on water. Daenerys listened, heartbeat steady. For the first time in memory, she felt neither warhorse at rest nor dragon caged. She felt still. Years cycled. Slaver's Bay renamed itself the Bay of Dragons on Qarthian maps, though Meereen's harbor folk jokingly called it Dragon's Nest, on account of nesting gulls who learned to scavenge leftover goat parts from Rhaegal's perches. Trade caravans stitched Kiskari lowlands to Valyrian freehold ruins, where smiths forged arrowheads from melted harpy brass. Visitors came to marvel at the great assembly. Princes of Dorne, envoys of Braavos, even a red priestess who claimed the Lord of Light, smiled upon mosaics lit by dragonflame each solstice. Through each season Daenerys presided, but gradually she found governance did not cling to her sole choices anymore. Delegates argued policy, subcommittees drafted tax scales, ward councils organized plague drills without edict. In such self-propulsion she sensed the first hint of what forever might truly mean. A city not dependent on one woman's pyre-born will, but thriving beyond her shadow. Grey Worm became Marshal of the Wall Legions, training freedmen daughters as shield maidens. Missandei curated the Great Library of Chains, named so because its halls displayed every shackle cut since revolt, each tagged with the freed person's story. Tourists wept reading them. Drogon wandered far, rumored seen above Valyria smoking seas, yet each year he returned to roost atop the pyramid's highest spike during the 3 nights of the harvest moon, drawling thunderous purrs that shook silk banners. People lit lanterns and told children the Black King counted their wishes. Daenerys sometimes climbed the 73rd terrace then, feeding him sides of ox roasted in saffron. She would lay a hand against his obsidian scales and recall the night she unchained possibility. In his furnace-warm gaze she glimpsed a reflection, not a harpy queen, nor a conqueror, but a woman weathered and forged by choice. On the 15th anniversary of the Battle of Canefield Flames, Meereen awoke to rumor that the queen intended to abdicate. Citizens thronged the palace gates. Panic and disbelief tangling like barbed vine. Merchant princes feared tariffs without her gaze. Freedmen feared a master resurgence. Noon bell tolled. Daenerys appeared upon the dawn throne wearing plain white linen, crown held under her arm rather than upon her head. Silence drowned the cavernous hall. In this crown lie years of duty, she began, voice carrying. In my hands, its weight grew lighter with every link you broke beside me. Today, I find it lighter than air. That means Meereen can bear it. She set the crown on a crimson velvet pillow and gestured. A young woman stepped forward, dark-skinned, hair braided with silver beads, eyes bright as first summer leaf. This is Gaeta of the River Ward, born slave, schooled by your assembly, elected by your voice. I name her steward of the crown. Its fate, and yours, rest with the assembly henceforth. Gasps rippled. Yet amid disbelief stood spark of wonder. Could freed woman rule freed city? Could harpies share chambers with fishmongers? Could dragons stand watch while mortals shaped policy? Daenerys left them questions and descended marble stair. Rhaegal awaited upon plaza, kneeling low, wings forming archway. She mounted without saddle, without chain. The wind of his ascent roared like future crashing open. As the city shrank beneath, she saw figures spill into streets, a mosaic of colors woven through alleys once lined by gibbets. They did not bow. Instead they looked upward, shading eyes to watch the green star blaze across afternoon sky. Some cheered, some wept, some simply stared, yet none reached for shackles. Above the clouds, Daenerys drew a breath thin and cold, and realized peace had never been a silent, still lake. It was a river, restless in its course, fed by tributaries of compromise, sacrifice, and dream. She had been its dam and its deluge both. But now the river ran true beneath stars carved before men named the world. She laughed, wild, free, and Rhaegal answered with a bugling cry that scattered 1,000 gulls over the Bay of Dragons. Far ahead Drogon wheeled, a black spear against the heavens, and Viserion glimmered pale beside him. They welcomed her into the endless sky. Below, Meereen breathed, alive and unafraid, forever roused by fire yet choosing each dawn to build, to mend, to remember. Ilwenda. PG. SQL. Rain turned the desert skin into mud the color of pomegranate flesh as Rhaegal angled west, his pinions beating air that smelled of distant thunder and richer soils. Daenerys let the water needle her face until silver braids clung in ropes against her cheeks and the silk of her riding coat grew sodden, heavy. reminding her that even a dragon queen could feel cold again. Far below, the ruins of the Godsway oasis blurred into streaks of red and ochre. Broken pillars older than the Doom, the last stone skeletons of a city whose name the world had long forgotten. She guided Rhaegal with little more than touch and breath. The young dragon was grown massive and willful, yet gentled by her presence, as if accepting that the horizon itself obeyed her will. But in truth, it obeyed no one's. Horizons fled. That was their nature. She had flown for 2 days since leaving Meereen in Hizdahr's hands. 40 leagues of sun-scoured earth, 12 leagues of churning salt swells beyond Skagoshat Sound, and now this world of fractured stone rising where the great eastern trade road splintered into a dozen goat tracks. Behind her trailed Viserion, languid and pale as a winter moon, while Drogon rode a higher draft too remote to see, though sometimes she felt the tremor of his wingbeats like distant drums across her bones. A mother seldom forgets the rhythm of her firstborn. Rhaegal banked to follow a spur of crumbling basalt cliffs that curled like the spine of some buried leviathan. There, at the cliff's crown, a narrow plateau spread in ancient terraces where wind-gnarled olive trees still clung, gray leaves shivering against the scudding stormlight. Daenerys guided him down. His hind claws crushed loose slabs to chalk as he alighted. Hot breath steamed around her shoulders. She dismounted and stood a while, breathing the scent of wet stone, listening to nothing save the hiss of distant rain across parched canyons. Southeast, the dunes would be blooming now. Brittle red lilies springing from sand that had tasted dragonfire only seasons before. Northwest, the stony wastes would cave beneath an endless white horizon, where the Dothraki Sea began anew. Each wave of grass seeded with the bones of 1,000 khalasars that never found a better wind. She turned in slow circle, feeling the weight of quiet. The silence was not emptiness. It was choir. Cicadas sang beneath the clatter of rain. High above, invisible falcons shrieked challenge at her dragons. Her own pulse hammered, a drum for every memory she still carried. In Meereen, she had learned that rule was service and service sacrifice. Here she must learn, perhaps, what remained of the girl who once pressed bleeding hands against the pyre of a dead cow and walked out crowned in flame. Rhaegal nudged her gently, emerald scales slick with rain, yellow eyes blinking vast and gentle. She stroked the ridge of his jaw where spear scars from the Harpy revolt still welted faintly beneath the new growth of scales. "We have lost wars and won them," she said softly in Valyrian, so ancient even maesters called it cracked. "We have planted peace in ash and watered it with our own tears. But who am I when no one waits on my command? Who is a dragon when no city shakes beneath his shadow?" The dragon's only answer was the deep woof of air through his nostrils, sending ribbons of steam curling past her shoulders. She smiled. "A fair reply," she allowed, scrubbing rain from her brow. "Tomorrow perhaps we will find better questions." She inhaled the wet ferric smell of storm-kissed cliffs, an odor that reminded her of the black cliffs of Dragonstone, though she had never stepped upon those ancestral stones save in dream. She unpacked a tarry strip of smoked lamb from her satchel. Rhaegal's pupils widened, forked tongue tasting the wind for blood. She tossed the meat, watched him snap it mid-air, and laughed when Viserion swooped mere heartbeats later, pale wings blotting what remained of sunlight as he landed to demand equal tribute. She fed him too, then unhooked the gourd of sweet water sewn into her belt and drank until her parched throat softened. As dusk thickened, Drogon descended at last, vast, black, thunderous. He skidded to the edge of the plateau, claws carving furrows deep enough to swallow a wagon. Lightning sheared the western sky behind him. In its white flash he seemed shaped of night itself, a wound raked across the world. Yet when he lowered his head, nostrils flaring, she saw familiarity. The same stubborn loyalty that had carried her from the Dothraki Sea through plague and siege. She approached, placing her palm against the warm, matte scales of his snout. His breath smelled of burned goat and storm-torn cedar bark from the cliff valley. The comfort of it made her chest ache. "I freed a city," she whispered, "but I did not free myself. Perhaps that is our next flight, my friend." Freedom that owes nothing but truth. Drogon chuffed, something halfway between a grunt and a purr. Then he turned and settled, folding wings like black sails furling around a mast. Rhaegal and Viserion curled closer. Rain softened. Night rolled over them in slow, merciful darkness. Daenerys spread her cloak upon a flatter patch near Rhaegal's shoulder, tethering corners with shards of old masonry. Dragon presence warmed the air. Soon the stone beneath her was almost comfortable. She lay upon her side, gazing through the scalloped gaps in the clouds. The sky flashed silent whiteness, where lightning still walked, but thunder never reached. In that hush, she let sleep take her. Dreams came in a tangle. A court of ash where Hizdahr wore a mask, shaped like a human face, sewn of his own skin. Barristan kneeling beside a sepulchre carved from shattered spears. Young Gaeta standing atop a dais of broken chains, calling herself Harpy Breakering. Jon Snow's ghost, silver-eyed, reaching for a crown of pale flame. Beneath it all, the steady roar of wings, a sound that could have been Drogon's, or perhaps the world's heartbeat itself. She awoke before dawn, chilled, unsure whether the dew on her cheeks was rain or tears. Dragons slumbered, their breaths rising in slow billows. The storm clouds had broken apart, revealing a vault of stars sharper than any gem. She rose quietly, fetched her cloak, and approached the cliff's lip. Below, the desert floor unfurled, pale blue beneath starlight and moon-ghost haze. Somewhere out there the bones of her brother Viserys still lay unburied, burnt into the dust of vast Dothrak. And beyond that the wide, cold ocean he had promised would be conquered for her. All ghosts now, but not I, she murmured, tasting the conviction as if hearing it from someone else. Not yet. She thought then of Westeros. Rumor shrouded across leagues of salt. The Iron Throne remained contested. Raven whispers had reached even Meereen, telling of a boy king dethroned, of regents devouring one another, of a wolf queen in the ashes of Winterfell. Yet the realm still breathed. Did they tell children in Old Town of Daenerys, Stormborn's Bay of Dragons? Did they swear by her as sailors swore by storms? Or had her story become another far rumor, a cautionary tale of queens lost to sand and war? A flicker of resentment tugged her chest. Resentment against a world where her birthright remained forever distant, where her dragon's flight traced only the edges of empires that would not claim her. Yet deeper than resentment lived curiosity. What had become of the land where her ancestors forged destiny in black steel and wildfire? Would the small folk of Westeros kneel to a queen who spoke of parliaments and freedmen? Or would they call her foreign tyrant? She imagined Old Town's towering high tower glistening with harbor fog, the stormlands oppressive with pine and rain, the Eyrie perched like eagle above ragged gray seas. Places she had never touched, yet which had shaped her exile from birth. Rhaegal shifted, groaning, and she felt hunger stir in her belly as if echoed by him. She would need provisions, water skins enough for desert flight, and perhaps a route charted by someone who still remembered the old vales and wells surviving between Hiskari ruin and the red mountains of Dorne. The old trade roads had fallen to raiders since plague. Caravans seldom risked the wandering stone desert anymore, but there were still free cities along coastlines where coin could buy maps and alliances. Korth, Astapor reborn under new name, even Volantis, though she must tread carefully among black sails there. She recalled a word the Braavosi captains used, half joking, half prophecy. Gezimara, the tide that draws all water to its mouth. Westeros felt like that tide. Even Meereen's peace would be judged by the storms gathering across the narrow sea, once word of dragons reached their shores. Whether she flew west to claim, or to merely witness, the tide already moved. Dawn climbed slow. The first thin blade of sunlight slashed the horizon, igniting copper along every jag of basalt. She roused her dragons with soft clicks of tongue. Viserion rose, shaking dew from pale wings. He unfurled them in a stretch that showered cold droplets across her hair and cloak. Drogon rumbled, low but obedient when she urged him to kneel, straps of leather harness squeaking as she climbed atop the spine ridge where his shoulders rose like two fortress towers. She did not know how many days of flight separated her from the Jade Gates road where caravans still ventured. Nor did she know if her dragons would abide long open water past ancient Valyria. But she would discover, or perish. For once she felt no anxiety. Only a thrum akin to the pyre's heat all those moons ago. Risk was fire, and she had walked through fire before. They launched. Basalt cliffs dropped away beneath a maelstrom of wing beats that shook crystals of dried salt from every crevice. She guided Drogon northwest, glancing back as Rhaegal and Viserion lifted in tight echelon formation. The plateau dwindled to a dark tooth, then vanished behind morning haze. Each thrust of air across her face cleansed another web of fear. Hour by hour, the desert changed. Cracked marble outcrops gave way to red dunes robed in saffron dust. Mirage lakes shimmered upon the distant skyline, then fled like shy spirits. Once an abandoned caravan hove into view. 15 black wagons half buried, canvas flapping in sun-soaked winds, mules nothing but gnawed bones. Daenerys angled the flight lower. Lances jutted from skeletal wheels. Arrow shafts stuck in rotted wood. Corsairs or Dothraki or plague, no telling which. She urged Drogon higher, uneasy. Even queens of peace could find no quarter among such ghosts. At midday they reached the mouth of a rocky defile where a trickle of jade water cut down through sandstone. Lined by tamarisks and blue-flowered cram, she spotted movement. 3 hairless goats scrambling along the bank, hooves scooping mud. Rhaegal shrieked and dived. The goats scattered too late. Blood soaked the water where he landed. Drogon followed, slicing one flailing beast in half with a swipe of obsidian claws. Viserion contented himself with the third, its bleeding lost within pale jaws. Daenerys dismounted and filled her water skins. The stream tasted sweet, iron-laced. She bathed her face, glad to shed grit and sweat. Then she removed a coil of parchment from her satchel, the last map Barristan had left for her, sketched from Maester scrolls and Cellsail hearsay. It traced a dotted route. Stone Galley's Ravine, the Crescent Salt Pan, then past the ruins of Nugis settlements razed by her dragons years before. Beyond that, Qarth Seagate, and further still, the Summer Sea Crossing. She pressed her fingertip to each point, gauging memory against hope. If she kept to the ravine, she would avoid Dothraki outriders. If she struck due west too quickly, she risked burning water reserves. Dragons could fly over thirst, but she could not. She rolled the map away. That night she slept between Rhaegal and Viserion, cloaked in their merged warmth. Drogon roosted atop a standing stone 50 feet above, one eye glowing ember red as he kept watch. Dreams came again softer, tinted by memory of warm evenings on the black sands of Allah's shore, where she once camped with Dario before parting ways. She heard his lazy drawl teasing her about the size of dragon droppings, and found herself smiling in her sleep until tears nestled at the edge of lashes. Morning carried them away. 2 days later, the desert ended in a sudden tumble of cliffs that dropped into marsh flats, shimmering green and violet, beneath a lucent haze. Great winding rivers met here, before bending toward the Jade Gates. Villages dotted islets between reed beds and salt ponds. Smoke spiraled from dung-brick chimneys. Children ran waving bright ribbons as shadows of 3 dragons raced overhead. Men dropped wicker fish traps to fall upon faces in prayer or terror. Daenerys felt unease again. The uneasy joy of myths made flesh, of being omen rather than woman. She guided Drogon downward at the marsh's edge, mindful to choose a flat bank clear of homes, then dismounted slowly, cloak flapping as he settled. She waited. Soon fishermen approached warily in coracle boats stitched from reeds. Their trade tongue was thick with local vowels. They offered pearls, dried river eels, casks of murky wine. She refused pay, requesting only boiled rice for herself and a cask of fresh river water. The eldest fisherman bowed so low his forehead smacked hull plank. He insisted on giving dried lotus cakes as gift for the Moon Mother of Flame. She accepted one, tasting an unfamiliar nutty sweetness. When she smiled thanks, a girl no older than 9 squealed in delight and pointed at the dragons napping in afternoon sun beyond. In barter for coin she gathered fresh canvas, iron nails, stiff rope, repairs for harness straps beginning to fray. She asked after road bands along the northern caravan path. The fisherman spat at mention of a sell-sail company calling itself the Red Tally, raiders rumored to pluck stragglers from spice trains and ransom them to Volantine ships. She would need caution, perhaps flight strictly by night across those trade spurs. She camped 1 league north of the marsh village, beyond a dune ridge where scrub pines stunted by salt wind clung to life. That dusk brought a sky so violently orange, she felt it might shatter under its own brilliance. She traced the shape of her dragons against that molten canvas, silhouettes majestic, yet still small in infinite vastness. A story, she realized, was never truly one person's. It was a net flung across a world of winds, catching moments of flame and letting others fall away. She sat cross-legged beside her travel fire, chewing lotus cake crumbs while scribbling into a narrow ledger. Her first attempt in months to set thoughts to parchment. She wrote of Meereen's assembly, of Gaeta's quiet courage, of freedborn children wearing harpy wings remade into toy crowns. Then a line that surprised her hand as she penned it. "Yon day I will return to see if the seeds we planted still bloom beneath another sky." She closed the book, idly tracing the leather cover. What other seeds might she sow before death? She envisioned a realm of free ports along the summer sea, where dragons patrolled not to threaten, but to keep pirates honest. She imagined meeting the shrinking pockets of Valyrian bloodlines, rumored in Lys and Volantis, cousins unknowingly bound by the same fire. And somewhere beyond, the wall of Westeros still stood, and the north of which the old song spoke, and Dorne where desert folk danced blade-cross rhythms under moons as dry as these, yet cooler. The next 10-day blurred beneath wing and haze and sunscreens. They skirted raider bands like ants scurrying across sand, soared over Carthene armadas anchored offshore, slept upon basalt arches jutting from turquoise water where gulls nested fearless. Once a Volantine war galley loosed 2 scorpions in vain, the bolts falling wide. Drogon answered with a roar that cracked spars, though he spared them flame. Word traveled swifter than ravens. By the time Daenerys touched down in the spice-clotted bazaars of Astapor Reborn, crowds parted in silent awe, merchants prostrated, and children flung garlands of white hibiscus at the dragon's feet. Astapor Reborn, no longer the red city of butchered slavers, but a low sprawl of canaled wards, under council of ex-Unsullied and Giscari guilds, received her as legend. They begged she stay, arbitrate disputes between silk weavers and brick masons, confirm boundaries of grazing commons. She spent 3 days in council chambers that smelled of limewash and warm seashells, guiding them toward a charter inspired by Meereen's assembly template. They gifted her a dagger with pommel scrimshawed into twin cranes, symbols of trade winds, and a pouch of tiny seeds that bloomed into scarlet orchids in seawater soil. She left at dawn of the 4th day, and the city's bells tolled farewell. Drogon seemed restless as they ascended, turning his muzzle again and again toward the western horizon, where clouds lay like iron bruises. She understood. "Soon," she told him, stroking the ridge behind his eyes. "Soon the world we were born from will loom our reach." By increments, the land changed. The summer sea stretched beneath them, lapis blue turning slate, then ink as depth swallowed light. Dragons glided in easy circles above, each thermal carrying them leagues. Nights they camped upon lonely basalt spires jutting from the sea, last bones of some drowned mountain range. Daenerys tethered rope ladders between peaks, so she might walk star-pricked air above black void, each step demanding trust in leftover shipcord knotted between dragon claws and stone. Rhaegal slept curled around the spire crown, Viserion perched sentinel on a lower ridge. Drogon roosted on the largest tooth, tail flicking like storm flag. On the 7th day of sea flight, she sighted shadowed humps ahead, land, smoke, mist. Her pulse quickened. Valyria. Even from miles high, the air changed, tasting of sulfur and broken dreams. At first, the dragons hissed, uneasy. The doom's memory lingers in their blood. But trust overcame dread. They descended in tight spiral. The upper peninsula of Valyria lay cracked by rivers of cooled obsidian, each fissure glowing faintly emberish though centuries had passed. Ruined towers poised atop cliffs, like fingers clawing at unforgiving sky. Inland, sickly green fireflies drifted in midday gloom where unnatural vapors rose from vents. She guided Drogon along an arc that skirted the worst fumes. The air shimmered with heat, though no sun touched her. Silent lightning stitched cloud to mountain as if gods still fought. They landed upon a broad apron of unconquered basalt seldom visited by men. Here twin veins of pale marble ran like ghost rivers beneath the obsidian crust, giving everything a faint luminescence. Daenerys dismounted slowly. Thick warmth pressed her lungs. Breathing felt like swallowing ash. Yet she felt drawn, an invisible hand tugging at the core of her being toward the crumbled colonnades half sunken at the plateau's heart. The dragons did not stray far, tails twitching, uneasy. She walked. Each column was carved with glyphs, older than recorded Valyrian script, serpents, stars, constellations no maester's chart depicted. Beneath one arch lay a mosaic frieze showing women crowned in flame, leading dragons of alabaster and midnight, through a ring of unbroken chains. She knelt, tracing crayoned lines worn by centuries of acid rain. Here, perhaps, the freehold once foresaw both its doom and its rebirth. She wondered if her ancestors had stood where she knelt, their hair stirring the same sulfur wind. A tremor rumbled. Earth vibration rolled through her soles. Rhaegal and Viserion screeched, wings half unfurled. Drogon roared at the sky. But nothing followed. No magma surge, no quake collapse. The land only breathed, as though reminding intruders of its slumbering wrath. She whispered apology in High Valyrian and retreated. She had come for omen and found enough. Dragons belonged nowhere and everywhere, but especially where courage proved thin. They lifted off in silent exodus. Behind them, Valyria slouched back into cloud, its phantom fires flickering like dying torches. Daenerys wondered whether any living soul now prowled those nightmare streets besides whispered stone men, but she would not test it. The prism sea opened before them, expanse as empty as the sky, a crossing seldom attempted, even by Quarthine spice captains. Yet further west lay the Stepstones, then Tyrosh, then Myr, and beyond all that, the velvet green of Westeros. Time lost meaning in open air. She sang sometimes, old lullabies of Bravos taught by Kurumo. She recited lists of freedmen still owed land allotments if she ever returned, shaping their names against the wind so the world would keep them. Dragons hunted giant squid in far ripple trenches, rising with blackened tentacles clutched in jaws. She dried slivers of their catch upon Drogon's back where heat pulsed faint under scales, eating briny strips to keep strength. Sunrises came violet and gold, sunsets bled crimson across waves. On the 15th day, an island chain rose like scattered emeralds, stepstones, fortress of smugglers and storm pirates. She landed upon a deserted beach, strewn with broken crab pots and half-buried anchors. The surf pounded tonal and deep, churned white by jagged reefs. She scanned the cliffs. No signal fires, no watchers. Good. She needed rest and fresh water before the final push. Inland paths wound through scrub cedar toward a ruined watchtower. She left the dragons in a sheltered cove, instructing them through touch and tone to remain unseen. Drogon's low rumble told her he would stay only because he chose, but chose he did. She climbed until the tower loomed overhead, ivy wrapped around cracked mortar. Inside she found stale air, pigeon droppings, and dust-shrouded crates of Myrish crossbow bolts long corroded to rust. But, beneath a rotted stair tread, she discovered a bronze cistern, still half-filled by captured rain, filtered crystal clear by centuries of seep through limestone. She drank until belly glutted, then refilled skins. She slept within the tower that night, curled near a fire built careful not to smoke the roof blacker than it already was. She dreamed once more. This time the dream set her upon a field of pale snow. A wall of ice soared at one horizon. Dragons wheeled overhead, their shadows sliding across white far below. She walked clutching a torch that sputtered ice-blue flame, yet though the air seemed endless winter, she felt no cold. Ahead a figure approached, tall, cloaked in gray wolfskin. His eyes glinted dark under a cowl. He carried no sword. When he lifted his hand, snow fell upward around them as if time itself reversed. She tried to speak, but no breath left her. The man pressed his palm to her cheek, warm as summer sun, and whispered, "Fire mends the broken crown." Then he dissolved into wind, and she awoke with a cry that startled roosting pigeons to flight. Dawn found her washing face at the cistern, tasting tears and salt water. She harnessed dragons and flew northwest. The stepstones gave way quickly to deeper straits dotted with merchant flotillas. Once a Taroshi caravel attempted pursuit for half a league before turning away when Viserion dipped low enough to scorch its mainsail clew by inches. She turned no vengeance. They had feared nothing more. By late afternoon, a green-gray smudge appeared on the horizon. Land more massive than stepstones, thicker with coastal fog. Cape Rat. Westeros. Drogon shook wings as if sensing the change in the air. Oak and myrtle, peat smoke faint on the wind from fisher hearths. When the first gulls circled, she guided descent to a lonely cliff promontory, where a weather-beaten lighthouse stood vigil, its beacon shattered and long unlit. She dismounted onto wet heath spongy beneath boots. Beyond, a game trail wound inland through fields purple with heather and yellow gorse. Somewhere a dog barked. Sheep bells tinkled, the simple music of an island that still believed dragons dead. She tethered dragons by will alone. They roosted upon the lighthouse ruins, curling tails around cracked flagstones like black and gold serpents. She walked to the cliff's edge. Below, whitecaps hammered chalk rock, sending bursts of glittering spray. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. The air tasted of everything she never knew she missed. Brine from a colder sea, peat smoke curling from crofts unseen, time thick in sodden earth. She was home, out of childhood, but of blood remembered in bones. She drew her cloak tight, turned inland, and took the first step toward an unknown throne. Rhaegal bellowed once, a low call that shuddered across the heath. Viserion echoed softer. Drogon watched in silence. And Daenerys Targaryen, stormborn, breaker of chains, widow of the great grass sea, walked forward, neither conqueror nor queen but a pilgrim seeking what fire could not grant her. The meaning of peace, beyond walls of any city. She did not look back. The horizon awaited, and she would meet it stride for stride, until wind or fate decided otherwise. Dragons rose overhead some moments later, one by one, vast wings beating perilous lullabies across a sky that no longer remembered their kind, but soon would. The lighthouse crumbled a little more into the sea's hungry mouth as they passed. Somewhere, far inland bells rang noon for simple folk, unaware the world had just changed.